It's an exquisite piece in ivory and cream. I think we definitely see Cecil Beaton's genius and design aesthetic within the costume worn by Julie Andrews. My Fair Lady is a musical written by Lerner and Lowe that premiered on Broadway in 1956, telling the tale of Professor Henry Higgins and a bet he makes that he can turn anybody into a high-class society person. So who becomes the person of interest? Well, Eliza Doolittle, a Cockney flower seller who he takes under his wing, teaches her how to speak, in his opinion, properly, and sees if she can pass as a lady of high society. It was Julie Andrews who originated the role of Eliza Doolittle on Broadway and performed there before the show transferred to the West End, receiving the most wonderful reviews and really cementing herself as that role on stage. We're very lucky in the V&A to own one of these historic garments from the West End production of My Fair Lady, worn by Julie Andrews, not at the beginning of Eliza Doolittle's journey. So this is when she has undergone some of that training and tuition, and she's being presented at the ball. This costume is made from the most beautiful ivory satin and silk chiffon, which today is in need of some conservation.
It's been at the museum since it was purchased in the 1980s, so 40 years in storage. It's the first time that we've actually had the chance to put it in a display here at the museum. So it's really exciting to be able to share it with the public and get to work on such an iconic piece of theatre history. So this is quite a complex garment. It's got lots of different materials in it. So we've got crepeline and we've also got silk satin. Some of the construction around this top area here, you can see that we've lost some of that overlay. And the overlay is a really delicate fabric. Something that does concern me about this as an overall object is it's really heavy. A lot of that comes from having all of this heavy beadwork and also all of these metal threads at the bottom. And that will ultimately be putting quite a lot of stress on the waistband up here. What we can do is work with our colleagues in costume mounting to make sure that when it's on the mannequin, we're actually having a really secure, well-fitting mannequin, and that all feeds into the long-term preservation of the piece.
What I'm doing now is a kind of preliminary filling out of this mannequin based on the measurements that I've taken from the dress. The reason why I'm doing it that way is because the dress is quite delicate and we need quite a bit of support in the dress so that it doesn't want to slide down. And also to try and get the correct placement of the bust, because the dress is from the 1950s, so we want that quite pointed shape of the bust.
Wow.
I know.
Look at this. I mean, gosh, I haven't seen it full out of
it's been in its box for so long.
I mean, the red jewels absolutely catch your eye, don't they? And amongst this sort of ivory.
Yeah, you can really imagine it kind of shining out on stage, can't you?
So it seems like there's quite a bit of work that would need to be done, though. You know, there, here, I'm seeing these areas
exactly.
here.
And this is something that I really want to talk to you about, actually, was the kind of the level of conservation, because we do want to keep some of her story and some of its story as a theatre piece.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important to keep these. That's all about that, you know, the labour of the garment, really, and how that worked.
And we've got the label, and the label is lovely, and it's...
Miss Julie Andrews, typed on the typewriter, of course.
Yes.
So what are the next steps?
There'll definitely be some of the beads where I need to go in and secure the loose threads. I think because we've got some splits and holes, I'm going to dye some fabric that's the right kind of weight and make sure that I can get a really nice sympathetic colour match. And then on the outside, those patches will be just to make sure that we're not going to have any more tears around areas that are already ripping. And then I think on the inside, I'll have a look at how that weight distribution is across the waistband and reintroduce some of those construction stitches that have been lost.
Yeah. So it's going to need quite a few hours then.
A fair amount of hours. Our silk crepeline is slightly off-white anyway, and all I want to do is add a slight bit of warmth to it. It's a little bit cool for the dress, so I've chosen dye stuffs that have brown tones, orange tones, yellow tones, and that seems to be the colours that we've got in our reference material. They are giving the right kind of shades to match the dress. The ratio of these stock solutions is what provides the subtle differences between the final 4 samples that I'm going to have at the end of the process. No matter how many times I dye, I always have my dye cycle up. The dye cycle is the recipe, so if I've prepared my ingredients, then I need this recipe to tell me exactly what temperature to have my water, exactly how long I need to hold different temperatures for those different stages. So this has had its 2-hour dye cycle, and now that it's all finished, it's been cooling down over the last half hour or so. So it should be ready for me to take them out, give them a rinse, and see what our final colours are like. So I'm just going to take a little sample of each corner just to get an idea of how close my colours are. This is my completely undyed crepeline, and if I grab a bit of my black, we can see that it's just a very subtle kind of knocking back. It is technically off-white, but it does look quite white against the more kind of yellow tones. So I'm going to find an area where I do need to do some work and just kind of offer it up and see how those colours match.
The costume, and indeed all the costumes for My Fair Lady, were designed by Cecil Beaton. Now, Cecil Beaton was an incredibly artistic individual. He was born in 1904 and is probably best known as a photographer. He was an amazing fashion photographer for Vogue and Vanity Fair, and in 1937 he became the official court photographer for the British royal family. And of course it's that wonderful insight into glamour photography that he brings to being a stage designer. We're very lucky at the V&A not only to have that wonderful dress worn by Julie Andrews, but also to have some of Cecil Beaton's designs for My Fair Lady. And one of those is this really iconic piece which is showing some of those costumes. And this was really, really important and iconic in that whole history of musical theatre, because the black and white ascot scene is very different to anything that had been seen before. We think about the world of musical theatre as a wide colour palette, the opportunity to use that. Suddenly in this scene, you're using 2 colours, black and white, very bold, very iconographic.
Oh, this is such a gorgeous costume, and the beadwork is just exquisite.
In 2018, 60 years after the West End premiere of My Fair Lady, the Lincoln Center in New York decided to revive it. And this time the designer is Catherine Zuber.
I love the boldness of the center detail. The beading is exquisitely done. I mean, Cecil Beaton was such a genius. It's always been quite daunting to create costumes for such a beloved musical that was originally designed by such a master. Anything that we've done in our production of My Fair Lady is an homage to his brilliance, really.
Wow.
So this is a strap that I've put in place. So I've stitched them into an inner waistband channel.
Ah, I see.
So by stitching them further down rather than right on this edge, it's helping really support the kind of the weight bearing area. Obviously this is quite friable. A lot of the beading has already been lost. But actually what's great is once the mannequin is finished, the dress won't need the straps at all.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it'll go from being like this, and we can just, you know, we'll just take them out entirely, and you will just kind of get that floating, as you say.
So it will be there floating like that.
absolutely.
We won't even need to see those. That's going to look absolutely stunning.
I'm very excited.
It's wonderful to finally see that costume worn by Julie Andrews on display in all its glory. A transformation arguably echoing that of the character itself, and to be reunited with these other wonderful pieces from My Fair Lady history to really tell that story of one of the most iconic musicals of the 20th century.